Hello and welcome back to the Jobless Bum YouTube channel. I hope you are having a fantastic day today. Today we are going to be ranking the logos of the UEFA Champions League, and we're going to see which ones are really good and which ones are really bad. And if you do end up enjoying the video, be sure to check me out on Twitch. Link will be in the description. I always do these videos live on Twitch, so if you want to see the action as it happens live, definitely go check out my Twitch channel. And without any further ado, let's get right into it. First up on our tier list, we do have Untracked Frankfurt, and this is a really good logo. I think we got this red and this white. I think that's a really good color scheme. You got this impressive bird in the middle of the logo. I mean, sometimes you can make a bird look non-menacing, but this bird is really cool. It looks menacing. You got the feathers all spread out and stuff, and it makes the logo look impressively large. I think it's a really good logo. I think the color scheme works well. I like the bird in the middle. I think this is an A tier. I don't know necessarily that it is an S tier logo because there are some really good logos later on in the list, but I think it is a really solid start to our tier list. Next up, we do have Tottenham Hotspur, and I already talked a little bit about this logo in our English Premier League logos tier list, which if you want to check out, link will be in the description. But to summarize, I think it's a bit too simplistic for me. It is pretty iconic though. I'm going to put it in the C tier. It's not a D tier logo. There's definitely logos that are worse than it, but for me, it's probably a bit too simplistic, and there is a little bit of a bias factor here. I am a Chelsea fan, so I can't rank the rivals too highly on the list, but yeah, Tottenham Hotspur, we're going to put in the C tier. Next up, we do have Sporting from Lisbon, and I think this is a interesting logo. I like this little, I think that's supposed to be a lion in the middle. This green and yellow color scheme I think is really good. And I like these green and white stripes on the logo too. I think those are really cool. I think this is a really solid logo. I think this logo will probably be our first entrant into the S tier. I really like it a lot. I really like the colors. I think it's a really good logo. And if I was a Sporting fan, I would be proud to have this as my team's logo. Next up on our tier list, we do have Olympique Marseille, and I think this is an interesting logo. In terms of logos that are just letters, I think this is a really good logo. You got this O, which is not that interesting, but this M is really cool. It just looks very distinct. And you got like a little yellow star on the top for, I think it was their Champions League win. I think that's symbolizing. But I also love this blue color as well. So even though it is just letters, and I'm not really that big of a fan of logos that are just letters, I'm going to put it in the B tier. I think this is about as good as you can get with a logo just being letters. So I'm a really big fan. Next up on our tier list, we do have AC Milan, and this is a really interesting logo. You have a few design elements. You have this interesting oval shape, which also is shared a little bit by Shakhtar later on in the tier list, but you got this interesting oval. You have these two contrasting designs. You have the black and red stripes, which they play in on their jersey. And also you have this little cross on the white background. I think this is supposed to be referencing the English flag. I think AC Milan was founded by Englishmen. You'll have to check me on that. Put in the comments if I was right on that. But I think this is an interesting logo. I think it's a bit cluttered, a bit too much going on in terms of the conflicting designs, but it is very iconic. I like that they at least made an attempt to do something with this logo, so I'm going to put it in the B tier. I think it's a really solid logo. I think you could probably modernize it. It looks a bit dated, and you could probably do a few things with it, but I think it's a really solid logo. Next up, we do have Chelsea, and as you may or may not know, Chelsea is my favorite European soccer/football team, and I honestly really love this logo a lot. You got this menacing lion in the middle of the logo. It's holding the staff. It's very royal. You got the roses on the side of the logo as well. The yellow outline on the letters and of the circle itself is really cool. some people may say that I'm a bit biased as Chelsea is my favorite team, but honestly, I think this logo is a definite S tier. It's really good. We're going to put it in the S tier. I'm going to rank these both at the same time, but we do have Red Bull Salzburg and RB Leipzig, and I touched upon this a little bit in my MLS logos tier list, which I'll also put in the description if you want to check it out. But I'm not a big fan of logos that are just corporate advertisements. Like, I think the actual logos themselves are not that bad, but the fact that they just exist to promote some other brand, and it's very blatant as well. It's not like, you know, you could like conceivably say that it's not a Red Bull advertisement. Like, they made no attempt to hide the fact that it is just an advertisement for Red Bull. So the fact that it is just a blatant corporate sponsorship, blatant sports as advertisement, I gotta put both Red Bull Salzburg and RB Leipzig into the D tier. Next up, we do have Dinamo Zagreb, and this is an interesting logo. You have this red and white checkerboard, which is associated with Croatia, where obviously Dinamo Zagreb is from, and that's on one side of the logo. Then you got a little diagonal splitting of the circle, and on the other side you got this lowercase d on this blue/purple. I think it's a interesting logo. I like this side of the logo. That's the checkerboard. I really like that. But this side has always irked me. I actually played as Dinamo Zagreb in Football Manager, and I always had to look at this logo, and I always thought it was very dumb that they had a lowercase d in their logo. For some reason, that always just made me angry, because if you look at most other logos, they have capital letters if they're like trying to represent a letter. And this was just so different. It just always really made me angry. So I think if this was a capital D, I think this would probably be like a B tier logo, but just because of the lowercase d, I'm going to put Dinamo Zagreb in the C tier. Next up, we do have Real Madrid, and this is an interesting logo. You have the crown on the top of the logo, as it is a Real club, and you have the M in the middle. I think that's really cool how they made the M fit to the circle, and then you have CF in the middle as well, and you got a little diagonal blue line. It's a solid logo. I think it feels a little bit dated. It doesn't feel that modern. Honestly, I think this is another C tier logo. I think Real Madrid definitely could do with a little bit of a modernization of their logo. I think they could do some stuff to make it better, but it's also not a D tier logo. It's not one of the worst, so we'll put it in the C tier. Next up, we do have Porto, and this is a really interesting logo. You have what I assume is some representation of the city of Porto in the middle. You got a nice little crown on the top. I think that's really cool. These stars are really cool, but I like this blue ball in the middle. I think it's supposed to be a soccer ball. You got these lines on it going up and down, so I think it's supposed to be a soccer ball, but I've always seen it as like a disco ball. I think the little flares on it have always made it look like it's a disco ball in the middle of the party. So I always like that logo just looking at it. It's got a lot of intricate details on it. I think it's really cool. I don't know necessarily that it's an A tier. It might actually be a little bit too complicated, but that's also part of its charm. I think I'm going to put it in the A tier. I think it looks a little bit dated just because it's a bit complicated, but that's also its charm. So I can't knock it too much for that. But I think it's a really good logo. And again, if I was a Porto fan, I'd be happy that this was my logo. Next up, we do have Liverpool, and this is a really good logo. Like I said in my Premier League's logo tier list, I really like this one a lot. The colors really work. I like this red and white, and then the top and the bottom of the logo are this green. You have the club motto on the logo, which a lot of teams have gotten rid of. These used to be on the logos a lot. I really like it a lot. I think it's a very good logo. I'm going to put Liverpool in the S tier. I think Liverpool I don't like them as a team, but I think their logo is really good. So I got to respect that. We're going to put Liverpool in the S tier. Next up, we do have Shakhtar Donetsk, and this one is a really good logo, I think. You have the orange and black, which is a pretty unique color scheme, especially in soccer. I can't think of that many teams that have an orange and black color scheme. team. But you also have, I think this is supposed to be a flame, and I know Donetsk is known for its energy sector, so I think that's a real cool touch. I think it just looks really good. I'm going to put it in the B tier. I think it's very unique, very interesting. I think a lot of people might not like it. I could see it being a very polarizing logo, but for me, I like it, but I definitely think you could improve it, but I think it's a pretty good logo. We'll put it in the B tier. Next up, we do have Celtic, and I think this is a really solid logo. You got the 4-leaf clover in the middle, symbolizing the Irish roots of the team, even though they are in Scotland. That's a bit sus, but I do like it. I like the fact that they chose two colors, the green and the white, and they stuck with it. I think that's really cool. It's a really classic logo, I feel like, and it's really good. I'm going to put it in the A tier. I think there's some things they could probably do to improve it, but it's really solid as is. They don't really need to change it. It's a really classic logo, and it's a really good logo too. I really like it a lot. We'll put it in the A tier. Next up, we do have Manchester City, and this logo is pretty bad. I touched upon it in my English Premier League's logo tier list, but I'm not really that big of a fan of this logo, especially considering their old logo I think was much better. They had like an eagle on it. I think they had some different shades of blue on that logo too. And then they just chose this logo. I just think it looks pretty bad compared to the old logo. And there's a bit of bias on my part because I'm not that big of a fan of Manchester City. So I'm going to let that cloud my judgment a little bit. We're going to put Manchester City in the D tier. It's just a bad logo. No explanation really needed here. Next up, we do have Sevilla, and I really like this logo. It's just a solid execution. You got this little design in the left corner. I think that might be like the coat of arms for Sevilla, I think maybe. And then you got this little SCF, I think, in the other corner, and then little old-time soccer ball, and then you got the red and white stripes. I think it's a really solid logo. You got some yellow accents as well. I think it's a pretty solid logo. I don't know if I'd put it in the A or the S tier, but I think it's a solid logo, and I think it's perfect for the B tier. I think you probably could improve it a little bit more, maybe add some more character to it, because it's kind of overshadowed by the simplicity of these stripes, but it's a solid logo. We'll put it in the B tier. Next up, we do have Dortmund, and this is just a basic logo. You got the BVB 09, I think was their founding year, not 2009. 1909. It's just very basic. I can't really say that there's too much going on with the logo. It's not bad per se, but it's just very boring. I'm going to put it in the C tier. Honestly, if it had a bad color combination, I probably would have put it in the D tier, but I think the black and yellow is actually pretty good. So I can't put it too low on the list, but they definitely could improve this logo. So hopefully in the future they do for my sake, but I think it's just not as good as some of the other logos on this list. Next up, we do have FC Copenhagen, and this is a pretty simple logo, but I actually like it a lot. You got this menacing lion, which is really cool. I like that a lot. And I didn't notice it until I looked at this logo now, but you got the Denmark flag in there, which is really cool. And you got the team name as well on there. I think it's a really simplistic logo, but I like the white and the blue. I'm a big sucker for any logo that's just one color and then also white, which this is. So I think this is really cool. I don't know if it's necessarily an A tier, but I think it's solid, really good. I'm going to put it in the A tier. I don't think they need to do anything to it, but it's a really solid logo as is. So good job. Good job, Copenhagen. Next up, we do have Juventus. And look, is there anything that I can say that hasn't already been said by the football community at large when this logo was originally announced? This is just really bad. It honestly looks more like a fashion company logo than a football team. Like, it's just so bad. It's so simplistic. And they got rid of a really good logo to put this one in place. Their old logo was fine. Why did they need to modernize it like this? This isn't even like showing any of their history. It's just soulless, simplistic, too modern, too corporate, too capitalistic. There's no character, there's no charm. It's just what it is. So I can't put this very high on my list. Honestly, I'm going to put Juventus in the D tier. It's really in need of a different logo. This is just really bad. Next up, we do have Benfica, and I think this is an interesting logo. You got this nice gold eagle on the top. You got the old-timey soccer ball, which I think is really cool. And you got some red, some green, some white in the color scheme as well. And I don't know what this design is, but I think it's kind of cool. I think it looks a bit dated. It looks a bit old. This looks like a logo that was created in the 60s. I think they definitely could do some updating to it to make it more modern, but as is, I think it's an all right logo. I think it's solid. I'll put it in the B tier. I think they definitely could update it a little bit, but for what it is, I think it's all right. So we'll put it in the B tier. Next up, we do have Maccabee Haifa, and this is an all right logo. You got this little green outline with their name and other information about the team. You got a soccer ball in the middle, and then you got the Star of David in there as well. I think the green does not really go well with this black and white color scheme of the rest of the logo. Honestly, I think the logo would be improved tenfold if you replace this green and made it black. I think it would fit more, and I think this green is also just not a good color. Like, I think this just looks meh, but it's also not like awful, but this is pretty bad. It also looks kind of dated as well. I think it could do with a redesign, a little bit of a modernization as well. We'll put Maccabee Haifa in the C tier. It's not as bad as these logos in the D tier, but it's still pretty bad. So we'll put it in the C tier. Next up, we do have Paris Saint-Germain, otherwise known as PSG. And I think this is a really good logo. You have the Eiffel Tower in the middle of the logo, which obviously represents the city pretty well. You got this little yellow French cross in the middle as well, which I think is pretty cool. I like the blue and the red of the color scheme. I think that's pretty cool. This is an example of a logo that feels very modern, but also represents the team and the city well. So I think this is really cool. I'm honestly going to put this one in the A tier. I think it's a very solid logo. So good job, PSG. Next up, we do have Napoli, and it's just meh. Like, they took no risks on this one. They just put an N in the middle of a circle. And I do like the colors. I like this light blue and this dark blue. I think those are really good colors, but there's not really much to say about this logo. It's just there. But it's also not bad looking. Like, the colors are pretty good, but I can't put this any higher than C tier. I think it's all right, but they definitely could improve this logo. So hopefully Napoli improves this logo, but it's also a pretty classic logo, so I don't think they will. Next up, we do have Atletico Madrid, and I really like this logo somewhat because it reminds me of the American flag with this blue background, white stars, red and white stripes. I think that's really cool, but you also have, I think that's supposed to be a bear, and then this little tree on there as well. I think this is a really good logo. It's one of my favorites, and this is a logo that looks classic, but it also feels pretty modern too. So honestly, I think I'm going to put Atletico Madrid in the S tier. I think this is a really good logo, so good job, Atletico. Next up, we do have Bayer Leverkusen, and this is an example of corporate advertisement on the logo that I'm more all right with than like the blatant Red Bull Salzburg or RB Leipzig, just because of the history of the team. Like, the team was actually started by the company in like the 1900s. I think from the start, from their 1904 start date, I think they were like owned by the company. So the fact that there's some history behind it makes it a little bit better in my opinion. So I'm not as peeved by the advertising on the logo as I was with the Red Bull logos. And I like these little red, I think those are supposed to be lions on the logo. This yellow is pretty cool too. I think it's a solid logo. We'll put it in the B tier. I think it looks a bit dated. You probably could modernize it a little bit, but I think it's solid where it is, so we'll put it in the B tier. Next up, we do have Club Brugge, and I think this is an interesting logo. You got this blue and black in the middle. I think that's an interesting choice for the color scheme. You got this gold embellishment on the outside of the logo. It is a royal club, so you got to have the crown on the logo as well. I think the colors don't really mesh well together though. This gold and this black are kind of not really fitting well with the blue and the black in the middle. It looks a bit disjointed. Honestly, I'm gonna put it in the C tier. I don't think this is a very good logo. I think they could do some improvements, but as is, I think it's a solid C tier. Next up, we do have Bayern Munich, and I really like this logo a lot. this blue and red and white color scheme is really good. I like this little design in the middle with the diamonds. I think that's really classic. It's a pretty simple logo, but this logo looks very good as well. I'm going to put it in the S tier. I'm a really big fan of the Bayern logo. Even though I don't like the team, I got to respect the logo. We're going to put Bayern Munich in the S tier. Next up, we do have Barcelona, and much like the AC Milan logo, I think Barcelona was founded by Englishmen, so you got the little English cross in there, and then you have the Catalonia flag in there as well, so I think that's pretty cool. You got the blue and red stripes that Barcelona plays in, and you got this little old-time soccer ball as well. I like the design of the crest. I think that's really cool. I think it's pretty unique in terms of this outline. It's a classic logo. It feels a bit dated. It feels like you could modernize it, maybe add some more intricacies to it, but overall I think it's a pretty good logo. It's solid. We'll put it in the B tier. I think there's definitely some improvements you could make to it, but as is, it's pretty solid, so we'll put it in the B tier. Next up, we do have Inter Milan, and this is an alright logo. It's pretty modern. The blue and white is an alright color scheme. You got the black as well. It just feels very meh. Like, there could definitely be some improvements to it. Add some more intricacies to it. It feels very soulless, very modern. It's not representing the team either, I don't think, that well. What is the story behind it? You just have the logo and there's no real depth to it. So I think this is going to be a C tier. I think this is not awful, but it's pretty bad. So we'll put it in the C tier. Next up, we do have Victoria Pilsen, and this logo feels comfortable. I don't know how to really explain it, but it feels like a classic logo. You got this dated soccer ball in there. I don't know, the logo just looks like it came out of the 80s. That's the best way I can describe it. You got all these different colors in there too, and then you got the blue and red stripes in there. I think that's what their jerseys look like. It looks very dated, but it's retro in a good way, in my opinion. And for that reason, we're going to put it in the B tier. I think you could do some improvements to it, but honestly, I think it's fine how it is. And yeah, so I think it's a pretty good logo. So we'll put it in the B tier. Next up, we do have Rangers, and I really like the blue, the white, the red color scheme. I think that's really good. And you have this red lion in the middle. I think that's pretty cool. It's a solid logo. There's not really much to complain about here. Aesthetically, it looks really cool. And yeah, I don't know necessarily what you would do to improve it. It honestly feels a lot like the Celtic logo, where it's really cohesive as is, but I don't think it's up to the level of the S tier. So for that reason, we'll put it in the A tier, but it's a really good logo. I don't think you should change it, but I think it's really good, but it's not up to the S tier logos in my opinion. Finally, we do have Ajax, and this is a really cool logo. You have the reference to the mythological hero Ajax. It's a stylized version though. It's not realistic. It's pretty simple, but you still get the essence of the hero. And I think that's really cool. And it feels modern, but it also feels retro as well. So I honestly love this logo a lot, and I think it's going to be our final entrant in the S tier. So I really like the Ajax logo a lot. It's definitely deserving of an S tier placement in our tier list, in my opinion. I'm going to give you one final chance to look at our completed Champions League tier list. Thank you so much for watching our Champions League logo tier list video. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the video. If you agreed or disagreed with my placements in the rankings, I would be curious to know. And also let me know what your favorite logo from the Champions League is. Again, thank you so much for watching. And as always, be sure to stay safe.